The room was buzzing with excitement. Cameras flashed, fans whispered, and celebrities mingled effortlessly at what seemed like a typical star-studded event. Everyone was laughing, shaking hands, and posing for photos until one moment changed the entire atmosphere forever. In the middle of all the glitz and glamour, Will Smith suddenly approached Steven Seagal's wife. What happened next shocked everyone in the room. Without warning, Will slapped her across the face. Gasps erupted. People froze mid-step, some spilling drinks in surprise. Phones were already raising, capturing every second. The audience couldn't believe their eyes. The slap was loud enough to echo across the hall. A stunned silence followed. Seagal, standing nearby, blinked rapidly, struggling to process what had just happened. The crowd shifted nervously, whispering, "Did that really just happen? I can't believe what I just saw." People held their phones higher, eager not to miss a single reaction. Will's face showed a mix of intensity and urgency, but the reason behind his action was unclear. Everyone was mentally trapped, trying to guess what had led to this shocking moment. The tension was thick, almost suffocating, as bystanders whispered, nudged each other, and murmured questions. No one dared speak too loudly. They were witnessing something extraordinary and unpredictable. Steven Seagal, usually known for his calm and composed public presence, stood frozen for a few seconds. His eyes narrowed, scanning the situation. The world's cameras focused on him now. The audience wasn't just shocked by what had happened, they were drawn in, mentally holding their breath, trying to imagine what Seagal would do next. The room was alive with suspense. Every heartbeat felt louder. You could almost feel the emotions pulsing, disbelief, curiosity, fear, and anticipation all at once. Everyone present, and those watching online through live clips, were left asking the same question. What will happen next? And in that frozen moment, the stage was perfectly set. Will Smith's shocking act had captured attention, but it was Steven Seagal's next move that would determine how the story unfolded. The tension was unbearable. The anticipation was magnetic, and one thing was clear: no one in that room would ever forget this moment. What Seagal did next left everyone completely speechless. The moment Will Smith's hand made contact, chaos erupted. Cameras flashed nonstop, capturing the shocking act from every angle. The room, once buzzing with laughter and casual chatter, turned into a thick cloud of disbelief. People froze, mid-step, some holding drinks that trembled in their hands. Whispers began to spread. Did that really just happen? Is this real? Even the staff standing nearby couldn't hide their shock. Steven Seagal's wife touched her face, momentarily stunned, her eyes wide as she tried to process what had just occurred. The shock on her face mirrored the room's collective disbelief. No one had anticipated such a sudden, aggressive act in a public, heavily guarded space. The atmosphere shifted instantly from celebratory to tense, heavy, and almost suffocating. Seagal, standing a few steps away, felt the world slow down. His jaw clenched, and his usually calm demeanor was replaced by a flicker of disbelief. For a brief moment, it seemed as though he couldn't believe what had just happened in front of hundreds of cameras, reporters, and fans. The audience, both live and online, felt their hearts race in unison with the tension in the room. Every eye was on him, waiting, wondering, and calculating what he would do next. Bystanders reached instinctively for their phones, recording every reaction, every micro-expression. Some whispered among themselves, "I can't believe this is happening live. This is going to go viral instantly." The crowd was mentally trapped, curious, fearful, and utterly captivated. No one wanted to look away. As the initial shock began to settle, murmurs grew louder. People speculated about the reasons behind the slap. Was it a personal conflict, a misunderstanding, or something deeper? But no one had the answers yet. Everyone's attention was fixated on Steven Seagal. What he would do in this moment would define the unfolding drama. The tension in the room was so intense that it felt almost tangible. You could hear every sharp intake of breath, every shuffle of feet, and every whispered conversation. The cameras weren't just recording an incident, they were capturing history, an explosive, unforgettable moment. And then came the engagement moment. Phones were raised not just to capture the video, but to share it. Online viewers watching live began flooding social media with reactions, memes, and clips. The event became instantly global, with people across the world asking, "What's happening? Where is this taking place?" Before the drama continues, tell me where you're watching from. Which city or country are you seeing this from? Comment below. Meanwhile, Steven Seagal's expression shifted subtly from shock to focus. His calmness, even under such an unpredictable attack, began to register with the crowd. It was clear. The next move wouldn't just be reactionary, it would be strategic. Every person in the room instinctively leaned forward, mentally preparing for what they knew would be a jaw-dropping response. The moment was surreal. The chaos, the murmurs, the flashing cameras, and the tension combined to create a scene that viewers would never forget. Everyone watching, both in person and online, was caught in a psychological trap. The urge to predict what Seagal would do next consumed their attention completely. At this point, the stage was perfectly set. Will Smith's sudden action had sent shockwaves through the room, but it was Seagal's impending response that held the power to turn the entire event upside down. Every heartbeat felt louder. Every second stretched endlessly. The suspense was unbearable, and that's exactly what made this moment impossible to scroll past. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Steven Seagal, the legendary action star known for his composure and unshakable presence, stared at the scene unfolding before him. His wife's hand instinctively rose to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. The audience was silent, every whisper swallowed by the thick tension in the room. Phones hovered mid-air, capturing the disbelief on everyone's faces. Seagal's mind raced. He had faced countless opponents in film and real life, but nothing had prepared him for this public, completely unexpected act. The slap from Will Smith was not just physical, it was a psychological shockwave, a challenge that demanded a reaction. He could feel the collective gaze of hundreds of people in the room, all silently demanding, "What will you do next?" For a few tense seconds, Seagal froze. His body remained motionless, but his eyes scanned the room like a hawk, assessing every angle. He wasn't just calculating the next step, he was measuring the energy in the crowd, the reactions of the staff, the whispers of reporters, and the chaos of flashing cameras. Every detail mattered. Around him, the audience began to murmur louder. Some held their hands to their mouths in disbelief, while others whispered urgently to friends, "He's not moving. What is he going to do?" The tension was palpable. Every heartbeat in that room seemed amplified, echoing the silent anxiety that gripped both the crowd and the viewers watching online. The moment demanded a choice. Seagal could react impulsively, letting anger and embarrassment dictate his actions. Or he could hold his ground, maintaining control of both the room and the narrative. For someone like Seagal, who had spent decades mastering not just martial arts but psychological presence, the answer was clear. He would not allow an impulsive reaction to steal the narrative. Instead, he took a slow, measured step forward. The subtle motion was enough to make the room lean in, mentally holding their breath. You could almost feel the collective heartbeat of the audience, each person caught in a psychological trap. They were no longer mere spectators, they were participants in a high-stakes mental chess match. Will Smith's expression flickered with surprise. Even he hadn't fully anticipated the calm, deliberate focus that Seagal now exuded. Every eye in the room followed Seagal as he slowly raised a hand, not in retaliation, but in acknowledgement. His calm demeanor made the crowd question themselves. Is he going to retaliate, or is this some form of silent power? Seagal's wife looked at him, her fear slowly shifting to admiration. She could see the strength in his restraint, the deliberate choice to remain composed, despite the shock. The emotional tension rose further. Viewers watching the live clips at home or online were now fully invested, unable to look away. Their minds were trapped in the moment. What happens next? How will this unfold? If this happened in front of you, what would you do? Would you react immediately, or stay calm like Seagal? Comment your choice below. I want to see how you would handle this. Seagal's next move was subtle but commanding. He stepped closer to the situation, not aggressively, but with an unmistakable presence that quieted the room even further. The staff and nearby audience members instinctively gave him space. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every flicker of his eyes, and every small movement. The tension was unbearable. The audience, both live and online, was caught in a mental loop, trying to predict Seagal's actions. Every whispered conversation, Every wide-eyed gasp, every subtle shift in posture heightened the suspense. This wasn't just an incident they were witnessing, a masterclass in psychological control and human drama. By the end of this part, Seagal's calm authority had transformed the room. The initial shock of Will Smith's slap was now overshadowed by anticipation, curiosity, and awe. Everyone in the room and every viewer online was left trapped in a single, impossible question. What will Seagal do next? The stage was set perfectly for the next chapter of the story, the moment where Seagal's response would astonish the crowd and leave everyone completely speechless. The room remained tense, charged with a kind of electric anticipation that made every whisper echo loudly. Steven Seagal's measured composure had taken control of the situation, but the audience was still struggling to process the sheer audacity of what had just occurred. Will Smith's sudden slap had already become the center of attention, yet the drama wasn't over. Every person in the room, from the staff to the reporters to the fans, instinctively leaned forward, desperate for the next move. Then it happened. A quiet voice broke through the murmurs, almost too soft for others to hear. "Wait, isn't that Steven Seagal's wife?" The whisper spread like wildfire. Heads turned, eyes widened, and suddenly the crowd's focus shifted. Everyone began connecting the dots, their mental curiosity spiking as adrenaline mixed with disbelief. Phones were already raised higher, capturing every subtle movement, every flicker of emotion. Someone else gasped, louder this time. "Hold on, that's Steven Seagal. That's actually Steven Seagal." The realization sent ripples through the room. People nudged each other, pointing discreetly while murmuring, "He's a world-famous action star. This isn't just any public incident." The audience's collective mental state shifted from shock to fascination. The tension didn't ease, it intensified. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as if everyone's heartbeat had synced to the suspense of what Seagal would do next. Seagal, as if sensing the shift, maintained his calm, steady gaze. He didn't reveal any hint of pride or superiority. Instead, he let the room recognize him on its own. Every step he took was deliberate, measured, and commanding. His restraint only amplified the curiosity around him. People couldn't help but speculate. Will he escalate? Will he confront Will Smith directly? Or will he use this moment in a completely unexpected way? Meanwhile, the staff and security tried to maintain control, but even they were caught in the crowd's collective energy. Flashbulbs popped nonstop, capturing Seagal's calm yet imposing presence. The audience began whispering, sharing their own theories, their own guesses about the outcome. The entire room had become a mental chessboard, each person playing a silent game of speculation and anticipation. Some audience members began recording commentary for social media, narrating in hushed tones. "He's not moving. Everyone's frozen. I can't believe this is happening live." Online viewers, watching in real time, were drawn into the tension even further. They didn't just witness the event, they felt trapped mentally, unable to look away. Each second stretched, every small movement charged with meaning. The psychological trap was complete. The combination of shock, recognition, and Seagal's calm authority created a perfect storm. The viewers were no longer just spectators, they were participants in a story that demanded full attention. Every whispered realization, every gasped recognition, every subtle nod from Seagal heightened anticipation. Seagal's eyes scanned the crowd briefly, then returned to Will Smith. He didn't speak yet, didn't react aggressively, but the sheer weight of his presence was enough to silence the room. The audience collectively felt the tension rise in their own chests, imagining the power he carried without even lifting a hand. The whispers grew louder. "He's the real deal. That's Steven Seagal. He could take control of the room without even moving." The suspense was unbearable. Online viewers were glued to their screens, hearts racing, minds trying to predict what would happen next. Would Seagal retaliate? Would he speak? Or would he turn the moment into something completely unexpected? By the end of this part, the crowd's recognition of Seagal had elevated the stakes exponentially. The initial shock of the slap had been transformed into a high-tension psychological trap, mentally holding every person in the room and millions online in a state of intense curiosity and suspense. Every second became crucial. Every micro-expression mattered. The stage was set perfectly. The whispers of recognition had built the anticipation to a near breaking point. The audience was now fully invested, emotionally and mentally, and one undeniable truth remained. Whatever Seagal did next, it would leave the entire room, every witness, every viewer, utterly speechless. The room held its collective breath. Every eye remained fixed on Steven Seagal, whose calm, unyielding gaze had become the centerpiece of the entire event. The whispers from the crowd had escalated into a low hum of anticipation. Everyone, from the fans to the reporters to the staff, could feel the tension winding tighter with every second. The slap from Will Smith had stunned the audience, but now, the moment that truly mattered had arrived. Seagal's response. He took a deliberate step forward, not rushed, not flustered, just slow, calculated movements that drew the attention of everyone in the room. The sudden clarity of his presence was electrifying. Every whispered question in the audience was replaced with a single thought. What will he do next? The energy was palpable. The collective heartbeat of the crowd synced with the suspense in the air. Seagal's eyes locked with Will Smith's. There was no shouting, no aggression, no overreaction. Yet, the calm authority emanating from him was undeniable. It was the kind of presence that demanded attention and respect, and the audience felt it in their bones. The murmurs that had spread moments earlier fell silent. Every spectator, every phone recording, every camera flash was now focused entirely on him. Then he spoke. His voice was steady, firm, and deliberate, cutting through the tension like a knife. What just happened here was unacceptable. Everyone deserves respect, and no one should ever be humiliated publicly, regardless of who they are. The room froze again. This wasn't the reaction anyone had expected. The drama was no longer about the slap, it was about Seagal taking control of the narrative. The audience was mentally trapped in the moment, trying to comprehend how calm, composed, and commanding one person could be in the middle of chaos. Will Smith, for the first time since the incident, seemed momentarily taken aback. Seagal didn't attack him or retaliate physically. Instead, he wielded something far more powerful: authority and moral clarity. The contrast between the sudden aggression and this calm, commanding presence created a psychological trap. Every viewer, both in the room and online, was now mentally invested, trying to predict what would happen next. Seagal continued, his tone unwavering. Everyone here deserves dignity. We're all human, and no one's actions should tear that away from another person. The subtle moral weight in his words silenced the murmuring crowd. People leaned in closer, subconsciously measuring his every word. Even the staff and security felt the tension in a different way. It was no longer chaotic. It was a controlled storm, entirely dominated by Seagal's presence. The audience felt the emotional intensity spike. They weren't just witnessing a story, they were living it, heartbeats racing, caught in the suspense of every micro-expression, every subtle shift in posture, and every intentional pause. The psychological trap was complete. Viewers couldn't look away, mentally trapped by the gravity of the moment and Seagal's unshakable control. Every whisper, every gasped breath, every subtle exchange between Seagal and Will Smith amplified the tension. For the crowd, the moral weight of the situation combined with the unexpected authority of Seagal's response created a high-stakes, emotionally charged environment. Online viewers experienced the same adrenaline rush. Comments flooded in as people tried to predict the next move. By the end of this part, it was clear. Seagal had shifted the entire narrative. The slap, once the focal point of chaos, had become secondary. Now, the story revolved entirely around his composed, commanding, and unexpected reaction. The audience, mentally and emotionally trapped, waited for the next chapter, knowing that whatever happened next would be unforgettable, shocking, and viral. The room was electric. Every eye stayed fixed on Steven Seagal, whose calm, controlled demeanor had transformed the entire incident from chaos into a masterclass in authority. Whispers continued to ripple through the crowd. Is he going to escalate? Is this really Seagal? But no one fully realized the weight of what was about to unfold next. Then, someone near the back spoke up, almost inaudibly at first. Wait, that's Steven Seagal? The recognition spread like wildfire. Heads turned, eyes widened, and suddenly the murmur of curiosity escalated into gasps of astonishment. People nudged each other, pointing discreetly, but with growing excitement. He's the legendary action star. That's Seagal, the same one from all the movies. Brands. The realization hit the room like lightning. The energy shifted again, more intense than before. The audience wasn't just watching, they were fully trapped in the psychological suspense of the moment. Even Will Smith's expression faltered for the first time. The calculated aggression that had driven the initial slap was met with the sudden awareness of the man he had challenged. Seagal's calm authority, now fully recognized, became more than just presence. It was power. Without raising a hand or showing anger, Seagal had taken control of the entire room. The crowd erupted in a mixture of astonishment and admiration. Some whispered hurriedly, "He could handle this without even fighting. That's insane." Others raised their phones to broadcast the moment, captions already forming in their heads. Seagal remains calm after shocking incident. The room, once frozen in tension, now buzzed with energy, but the attention remained firmly on Seagal. He finally addressed the room in a calm but commanding tone. "Everyone here deserves respect. Actions like that may grab attention, but dignity is far more powerful than aggression. Remember that." The audience hung on every word. They weren't just listening, they were feeling it. The moral clarity in Seagal's statement hit harder than any physical confrontation could have. It turned the event from a moment of shock into a lesson in restraint, power, and integrity. The psychological trap was complete. Viewers, both live and online, were emotionally invested, mentally replaying every action and reaction. Have you ever witnessed someone completely flip a tense situation with calm and dignity? Type yes or no in the comments. I want to see who's handled a moment like this. The energy in the room shifted dramatically. Those who had been captivated by Will Smith's sudden action now felt the awe of Seagal's response. Even people who had been skeptical or critical of the unfolding event couldn't deny the lesson in composure and moral authority. The tables had turned completely. What began as a moment of aggression had become a display of patience, intellect, and emotional control. Seagal's wife, once shaken, now smiled subtly, a quiet acknowledgement of her husband's restraint. The crowd, sensing the shift, began to cheer softly at first, then louder. Cameras clicked rapidly, capturing the respect that Seagal commanded without a single show of force. The contrast between the initial shock of the slap and the controlled, authoritative response was almost cinematic in its intensity. Online, clips of the moment went viral immediately. Social media exploded with admiration, debate, and discussion. Millions of viewers were captivated by how a single person could turn a potentially humiliating and aggressive scenario into a lesson in respect and self-control. The story transcended the room. It became a global conversation. The room finally exhaled. The tension that had gripped everyone from the initial slap to the shocking calm of Steven Seagal's response had reached its peak. Cameras still flashed, but the chaos had shifted into awe. People whispered in disbelief. "Did you just see that? He didn't fight back. He handled it perfectly." What had begun as a shocking moment of aggression had now become a lesson in restraint, dignity, and respect. News of the incident spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with clips, reactions, and analysis. Millions of viewers around the world were glued to their screens, replaying the moment over and over. Comments flooded in from every continent as people debated the actions, praised the calm authority of Seagal, and reflected on the contrast between sudden aggression and measured composure. The incident became more than a viral spectacle, it became a global conversation. Viewers were captivated by the unexpected turn. Will Smith's impulsive action had drawn attention, but it was Seagal's calm, commanding presence that dominated the narrative. People admired how he turned a potentially humiliating situation into a display of intelligence, moral clarity, and emotional control. Even Will Smith, who had initially shocked the crowd, seemed to process the magnitude of what had just unfolded. He was no longer the center of attention, the spotlight had shifted entirely to Seagal. The incident highlighted an important truth. Real power is not measured by aggression or reaction, but by composure, presence, and the ability to navigate chaos with dignity. Across social media, viewers expressed their amazement. Clips went viral within hours, and hashtags referencing the event trended globally. Millions praised Seagal's restraint, sharing the story as an example of how to respond to conflict without letting anger dictate action. The conversation sparked discussions about respect, humility, and the power of staying calm under pressure. Even those who had not been present or watching live felt the emotional pull of the story. People commented on how mentally and emotionally intense it was, how it trapped them in suspense, and how it left them reflecting on their own reactions to confrontation. The story had achieved exactly what a truly viral event does. It wasn't just witnessed, it was experienced. Seagal's wife, once shaken by the unexpected slap, now stood beside him with pride. The crowd, still buzzing, recognized not only the tension he had endured, but the lesson he had delivered without violence. His choice to remain composed, to assert moral authority rather than aggression, left a lasting impression. People realized that moments like this reveal the true strength of character not in retaliation, but in restraint and dignity. Finally, as the story settled, the narrative became clear. The slap was an isolated act, but the reaction defined the story. Seagal had turned a moment of public aggression into a timeless example of calm, authority, and integrity. The audience, mentally and emotionally trapped throughout, was left with a lesson that resonated far beyond the room or the screen. If you believe that true strength comes from dignity, respect, and composure, type respect in the comments below. Share this video with friends who need a reminder that staying calm in the face of chaos is more powerful than reacting impulsively. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire, shock, and leave you speechless. The incident would be remembered for years, not for the aggression, but for the restraint, the calm authority, and the mental and emotional grip it held over everyone watching. It was a lesson in human behavior, a lesson in dignity, and a lesson the world couldn't forget.